Norman here, and are you still not subscribed to Matt's channel? Well, if you're not, hit the subscribe button because he's giving out free picks each and every week. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
UFC Vegas 87 back at the Apex for a fight night card. Ugly main event. However, can't complain with some big pay-per-views coming up. We got Miami next weekend. Looking forward to that. We do have a lot of big favorites on this card. Not a great card from a betting standpoint. But we do have some big names, right? We have Umar Nurmagomedov's on here. Mokaev is back in action. Just, the matchups are inflated here. But we'll talk about them, like always. Main card, we'll discuss. Provide free picks, leans, price talk, and more. Systemsportscapping.com or link.me/systemcapping. A lot of options over there. You obviously can become a client today. Receive personal plays with detailed write-ups, unit sizes, and more. Start profiting long-term against the sports betting market in multiple sports. Current runs, 14-6 all sports run, 25-7 free play short videos, mainly in the golf market. This is over a year now. A year and what? 3 months almost. Don't do a bet every week. No free videos every week. But I would say 2 to 3 times a month. You can find that on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. 5-2 UFC run, 2-0 NHL run. Low volume in the NHL, maybe a few plays a week at most. Let's do a UFC recap here. UFC recap here from UFC Mexico. UFC Mexico, not a great card for myself, mainly due to Moreno. I was on the Moreno side after a nice 5-0 UFC 298. Did not continue the streak. I thought it was close. I thought he could have won the fight. He just did not do enough. Didn't seem hungry to win the fight, is what I found. And Rovel, showed more. Sure, like he wanted to fight more. Now, you guys got to understand, he was throwing a lot more, but the percentage of landing was very, very low. He wasn't landing a lot. He was looking more active, but he just wasn't landing a lot. Moreno didn't use the takedowns. I wanted Moreno to mix in more takedowns. He got a couple that I recall. Just wasn't able to keep them down there, right? So my opinion was how he should have approached the fight was mix in more takedowns. He just tried to stand and bang for 5 rounds, and it seemed like he faded. I expected Royval maybe to fade later in that fight. Remember, he's taking his fight on short notice. Wasn't too concerned about the climb because I said he does train up in Denver, so altitude is going to be similar there. Even though I did mention it, but tip my cap to Royval. Obviously, Moreno did ruin the night, but it was close. It could have went either way, right? It was a split decision. Me personally, when I scored, I slightly gave it to Moreno, but I understand why Royval won the fight. He looked more active. Was he landing the bigger shots? Not really, no. Moreno worked the leg pretty well, landed the bigger shots in the fight. But Royval was just throwing more, and he stole it. He stole it because of that, the volume. Even though the volume wasn't landing a ton, he was being more active, which got him the win. Nice win for Ortega as well. Looked shaky at first, right? He looked like it was going to be a first-round finish. He also hurt his ankle. He jumped up, twisted it. What a disaster start. And then he showed that toughness that we always talk about with Ortega. The durability that we always talk about Ortega. And then had the advantage in the grappling and wrestling department, which I mentioned last week, could be the difference for Ortega. And there was some value at the plus money. Personally, I didn't bet a side in the fight. I was... I understood the Rodriguez hype just due to the striking advantage and the Ortega time off. Right, the time off was the issue for me to bet Ortega. I didn't know how he was going to come back and look in his first fight. Rodriguez was a lot more active, fighting big fights, right? And then Ortega realized that he could take advantage of the wrestling. And Rodriguez, his takedown defense is always an issue, and it showed in that fight. So that was tough to see. But nice win for Ortega. Happy for the guy. Like watching him fight. Entertaining fighter, right? He goes in there and he he lets it loose, comes forward, and he has the grappling as well. So always a fun fighter to watch. Good fight for as long as it lasted. Some personal news. Landed a nice writing freelance role with a big sports network from Europe, France actually to be specific. Looking forward to that and that opportunity. So you'll see some articles shortly from me focused around the sports betting world. Look out for those. I'll keep you guys updated. Let's get right into it. Shop around. Shop around for best prices. Have multiple books. Have access to multiple books. Props vary from book to book. Have money in multiple accounts. Gaziev minus 170 versus Rosenstrike plus 140. Not a main event anyone asked for, right? No one asked for this. Two middle tier heavyweights at best. Gaziev maybe can turn into something more than that. We just haven't seen it yet, right? And that's why this price has me a little concerned. It's a huge step up, right, for the fighter that fights out of Bahrain. He's Russian, I'm pretty sure, from Kazakhstan, but he fights out of Bahrain. Not too sure exactly what happened there, but he's representing Bahrain, so maybe grew up there is what I'm thinking. He's been fighting guys at the bottom of the heavyweight division, right? Guys like Budai in his debut. Remember, he only has one fight in the UFC, one contender series. And he's getting a main event spot already. This could be the fastest main event ever, guys. I don't know, but it's a very good chance that he's getting the quickest main event spot ever in the UFC. Right? He's 12-0, so he doesn't have a ton of fights either. Rosenstrike a lot more fights. It is worth mentioning. He's came on later in his career. He's like 35, 36 years old. I know for heavyweight it's not that important, but obviously he has some regional scene fights as well. But that's something to mention here, right? This is a big spot for him. How is he going to show up? Rosenstrike been there, done that, right? He's fought some of the best guys, and when he does, it's usually, it usually doesn't work out for him. He doesn't get his hand raised when he's fighting the best guys, but he's been in there, right? He has lost 3 of his last 4 fights, so the confidence might not be great coming into this fight. That's always concerning for me. Confidence, recent wins, losses, form, very important when I'm handicapping a fight. It's a negative here, right? Some of those losses, though, against some of the best guys in the world. Almeida, right? Almeida in his last fight, Volkov, and Curtis Blades, right? Any 3 of those guys beat Gaziev, no problem. All right, so these are big names. The only concern I have is, his wins. Sure, there's some big names here, but it's towards the end of their career. Andrei Arlovsky, Overeem, and Dos Anjos. Right, those are his key main wins. They're a little while ago, right? His most recent wins, Sakai, decent win, and Dawkins, who's, I don't think he's in the UFC anymore. So you got to factor that in, right? I think Rosenstrike is a mid-tier guy. He always will be when he steps up in competition. 2 things. His takedown defense is not good enough, and his volume. Right? But he has shown that he can go 5 rounds, and this is a 5-round fight, so you're going to have to give him that edge. The resume, the ring time, experience, and the 5 rounds. The one-shot power. That's what you have with Rosenstrike, right? He has that one-shot power. Volume's always low. Very low. Right? Under 3 significant strikes per minute. But he has that one-shot power that can just put your lights out at any time. Because he has some high volume, actually, obviously limited stats, right? Two fights that they keep the stats. Over 6 significant strikes per minute. And does have takedown ability from I've seen on tape from his previous fights before the UFC. So that could come, into play here in this fight. We just haven't seen it in the UFC because he's been able to finish guys on the feet. You know, personally, I'm staying away from this fight, even though there is some value here on Rozenstruik at this price. I just don't like the confidence and the current form from him. And there's not enough juice at plus 140. You know, if you start getting to the close 200s, then I'm going to have to take a closer look at it. You're giving me plus 140, not enough meat on the bone, as they say. Not enough meat on the bone. I think it will be interesting to see if Gaziev goes for the takedowns here. Rozenstruik, not terrible takedown defense, but it's not great either at 70%. Keep in mind, a lot of guys try to take him down. So 70% is not great, not terrible, and I haven't seen it from Gaziev at this level. His takedown ability, even though I've seen some like ground and pound finishes, some takedowns in the past, he's rushing, he has that Kazakhstan background, so I know he has some wrestling in his back pocket. You know, gun to my head, I would have to lean Gaziev here. Can't bet it, and there is value on Rozenstruik. I wouldn't call you crazy for betting Rozenstruik at plus 140. It's just, is there enough meat there at plus 140 on a guy coming in with no confidence and, you know, on a losing streak? Keep in mind, though, that losing streak's against some good fighters, right? The fighters are a lot better than Gaziev, and that's why I think at the plus 140, you're taking a chance. I wouldn't call you crazy. Obviously, a fight I don't think goes the distance. Gaziev, you know, if this fight goes later into the fight, third, fourth round, we're going to see if he's going to be able to hang. I don't see anything past 2 rounds for Gaziev. So keep in mind, Rozenstruik can go the distance. He went the distance with Cyril Gane. Petrino minus 334 versus Pedro plus 250. Money continues to come in on Petrino, and you know, for good reason. Petrino 10-0 in his career, still somewhat fresh. However, Pedro only has 14 fights himself, so it's not like he's fighting some sort of veteran here. Petrino also has some nice mid-tier wins. I have Petrino more well-rounded than Pedro. Pedro is more of that one-shot guy, right? Does have some submissions as well, but more of a one-round, early round type of guy. You know, he's dangerous, finish fights. Petrino doesn't have a one decision win, however. You know, it does, if it goes deep into this fight, we have seen Pedro gas at times. Pedro doesn't have that, you know, decision capability. When he does go to decision, he loses both fights, right? Because he doesn't have that volume. He doesn't have that wrestling in his back pocket. And that's what I think the difference is going to be. Like I mentioned, Petrino's very well-rounded. He does have some wrestling. Right? I think that's going to be a difference. Petrino, over 4 takedowns per fight currently, guys. Pedro's 52% takedown defense, I think, will be the big difference here. Right? That's why I do think, you know, Petrino is getting the correct money in the market right now. It's continuing to move. I think it was minus 300. It's keep going up. If you probably missed it already, if you haven't already bet Petrino, you know, I would probably lean him to get the finish as well. Like I mentioned, Pedro's takedown defense not great. The gas tag hasn't shown to be great either. So if you want to try to improve that price, maybe look at Petrino to finish the fight. Again, Pedro's always live to catch him. I get it, right? He's still young, Petrino. If he decides to just stand and bang in there, he can definitely get caught, right? If he decides to drop my water there. Stupid me. Right, if he decides to just stand and bang, he could get caught in this fight. I expect him, though, to be smart in there, look for takedowns. Pedro has terrible takedown defense, and exploit him there. That's where you're going to have a big advantage. On the feet, you know, I think it's probably fairly even on the feet. So use your MMA skills, make an MMA fight, and he should win this fight. Perez, plus 275 versus Makayev, minus 350. Right, you could say biggest test yet for the youngster Makayev. You know, some concerns with Perez, though, right? Is he going to make this weight? That's a big question. He's struggled over years to do so. A lot of fights have been canceled when booked with him. Watch the scales if you want to bet on this one. It's going to be very important, in my opinion. Again, you know, there's a situation where you probably like the favor. It's just hard to bet, right? So you got to try and maybe find an outcome if you want to improve that price. You know, Makayev, only 23. I can't say he's looked incredible, but he's been scraping by his wins, right? competition he has fought, not great. However, he did show a nice win over Tim Elliott. Sure, he's towards the end of his career, but he's a veteran. He knows how to win fights. He knows how to avoid, tough situations. And Mokaev actually found a submission in the third round. That was impressive. That was an impressive win in my eyes. Perez, at this price, yeah, sure, it's intriguing. Value on Perez, sure. He's fought the best of the best in this division. He does lose those fights when he steps up to guys like, Figueiredo, Pantoja. Right? You expect him to lose those fights. And he usually gets finishing. When he does step up in competition, he usually gets finished as well, which is a bit concerning. He does have a few nice highlight wins. Not great, though, right? Like Formiga, Espinoza. It's just low to mid-tier guys. He does have a huge professional fight ring time advantage, if you want to give Perez that. I probably lean Perez in the stand-up game on the feet. Going to be a lot more active. Mokaev, he just doesn't have good volume. It's super low, but the reason for that is because he's just continuing to spam takedowns. And that's going to be what this fight's all about. Right? That's what the fight's going to be about. Mokaev's 1.1 volume on the feet is just terrible. It's super low. But you got to understand how he fights, right? If you look just at stats, you're like, what the hell? This guy throw a punch at all? He does, but not a ton, because he's spamming takedowns at almost 7 per fight, guys. Not terrible takedown defense from Perez at 77%, but you expect him to be on his back. Now, Perez does have some good jiu-jitsu, black belt, but he's going to be on his back. How is that going to play out? Is he going to be able to get up? He has been submitted in the past by Pantoja being one of them. So how is that going to look? Right? Of course, I'm going to lean Mokaev here. Can't get to this price. Very difficult to call an outcome as well. Sure, Mokaev could find a finish in this fight, most likely by submission. So if you want to bet Mokaev by submission, that's probably the way to look. He's not going to knock you out on the feet. Ground pound finish, sure. That is a possibility, but I would lean the submission if you want to try to improve the price. Could go decision as well, though. So, yeah, I don't have a strong take on how this fight finishes. So I'll be staying off this fight personally. For video purpose, I'm going to lean Mokaev. Price is just not great. And I would say some small value on Perez, depending how he looks on the scales. Umar. Nurmagomedov minus 1,200. That's 1,200, guys. That means you can't bet it. Versus American plus 700. No idea about this guy. I have to watch tape on him, and for good reason. He's making his debut, right? And no one wants to fight Umar, right? He's very difficult to get a matchup, and he's just taken this fight. Ton of problems finding fights. This fight will tell you that. They had to find a fighter to making his debut to take it. Surprisingly, Umar accepted. I watched his interview yesterday. He said he needs to stay active. So he took it. I get it. Very dangerous. It's a lose-lose situation for him. He wins, nobody cares. He's supposed to win. He doesn't get a finish. They're like, why didn't you get a finish? Right? And I think that's where the value is if you want to bet this fight. Right? You take it by finish. You can get it at like minus 140. Finish anyway. So that's the way you would want to look at it. If you want to improve, you get submission plus 140. You're taking more of a chance, right? But the Kazakhstan loss, only one loss, 17-1, was by submission. And now keep in mind, this competition he's fighting is just very low level, right? So you don't know how it's going to translate to the UFC. Umar's going to win this fight. You can't bet at minus 1,200, but surprisingly, all outcomes besides, so you can get submission plus 140, finish by TKO, KO plus 333. Value there. Even though, I do think the submission's a little more live at plus 140. But, knocking the guy out, KO, plus 333 is a little appealing there. And you're going to expect him wanting to go out and finish this fight. If he doesn't finish this fight, there'll be some talk. Is he ready, for the top guys? Is he ready for that title shot, Corey Sandhagen type of fight? If he doesn't get the finish, you'll hear that. So I expect him to get the finish. You can approve the price. And if I were to bet it, it would be that way. A little more value at the submission at plus 140. Last fight here. Usyk minus 350 versus Schnell plus 275. Should be a high-paced fight. Usyk should win this fight, and he should win it on the ground, in the grappling, right? Schnell has some terrible takedown defense at 46%. Is known that he can't really take a punch. Usyk has 2 takedowns per 15, which is decent. So he does have some wrestling and grappling in game. A lot of submissions as well. Has 6 wins by submission. However, both of his wins in the UFC are by decision, which is worth mentioning. The one thing I can give Schnell is probably similar on the feet. Could have a slight advantage on the feet. I think it's fairly even, but his resume, I got to give him that, right? He's fought the much better guys. So it tells me that minus 350 price tag just is a bit too high for me to even consider, in a 2-fight parlay or something. Schnell wins, however, aren't great, right? It's Tyson Nam. The Mutijeri fight was actually a fun fight. Fight of the night. Showed a lot of durability in that fight. He was able to take a punch, which was kind of surprising. But then he's coming off a KO loss to Nicola in his last fight, which is concerning. Right? So, play has to be Usyk here. Probably won't go the distance, even though, like I mentioned, Usyk, the last 2 fights have. So, when he stepped up in competition to the UFC, hasn't been able to get the finish. But I like his durability, like his submission game. He's a fighter that will fight for your money. So you can get better price out there, maybe add it to 2-fight parlay. Maybe by finish, it could go either way. So I can't comment 100% on that, but I would lean the finish for Usyk, just due to Schnell's concerns of being finished multiple times. Tough card this week. I won't have much action on it myself and for clients. The lines are just juiced up here, in my opinion here. And there's not a ton of underdogs I like. Not a ton of value, even though you could take a few shots on the underdogs if you like doing that. Personally, I may have one play as an underdog, but I haven't made my mind up yet. I always do it after weigh-ins on Friday. Like I always say, guys, bet smart and know your limits. Enjoy this fight card.